direction nobody expected. William just stepped into his first moment as king in front of the entire world, and Camilla's family is finished. He went straight for everything that gave her power and tore it apart piece by piece without mercy. Then he turned on her children and stripped away everything Camilla had built for them as queen consort. And just when Camilla thought she'd already lived through the worst of it, she found out something that broke her completely. The person destroying her world was never William at all. It was someone she never once saw coming. This should have been Charles's event. Normally he'd be the one at the front, the face of the evening. But his health had deteriorated, and he was present, but only just. William was running things now, and that's what made people pay attention. For many watching, this felt like the first real look at a future king operating as king. The receiving line is where power gets displayed. Every guest walks through it, every handshake a public signal of who belongs. William stood at the front greeting foreign dignitaries one after another. Then Tom Parker Bowles and Laura Lopes came up, and honestly they wouldn't have gotten anywhere near that event if it weren't for their mother. William saw them and kept moving. No handshake, no nod, nothing. He walked straight past them, and then it got worse. The aide behind William, whose job was to announce each guest, actually started to introduce them, then realized what was happening and stopped mid-sentence. The result was an empty silence hanging in the room exactly where their names should have been. Everybody noticed. Tom and Laura noticed. Imagine standing there waiting to be acknowledged, only to watch the future king walk past as if you were never part of the line at all. Tom reportedly froze. Laura kept her composure, but witnesses said her eyes followed William as he continued greeting everyone else. That's the part that stings. He wasn't ignoring the line. He greeted everyone, just not them. Reports say Laura left almost immediately. Tom followed shortly after. Whether guests openly acknowledged the moment or politely pretended not to notice hardly mattered. The damage was done. Now here's where it gets interesting. A lot of people treated this like William was suddenly throwing his weight around. He wasn't. He'd already been carrying more responsibility while Charles's condition worsened behind the scenes. The difference was that now everyone was watching it happen in public. This was the moment people stopped talking about William as the future and started treating him as the man already making decisions in the present. That walk past wasn't about one awkward moment. It was a message. For years, Tom and Laura had access because Camilla opened the doors. They weren't working royals. They weren't there by rank. They were there because she wanted them there, and somewhere along the way, that access started feeling permanent. William's silence said otherwise. You were invited in. You were never entitled to stay. The rest of the day made it worse. Camilla had reportedly arranged a gift for William weeks earlier to smooth tensions. Word spread that he saw it for what it was and wanted nothing to do with it. It never reached him. Then his seat was reportedly moved away from its original position near Camilla hours before the reception. Officially, routine. Unofficially, nobody believed that. One incident might be coincidence. Two might be bad luck. Three in a single day starts looking deliberate. Together, they painted a clear picture. William wasn't continuing arrangements just because Charles had tolerated them. He was drawing his own lines, and for the first time, people connected to Camilla's side of the family were finding out exactly where those lines sat, in front of everyone. If you thought the receiving line was the worst of it, it wasn't. Not even close. The real losses started the next morning. Before breakfast was finished, Camilla's office had already taken 3 separate calls, each worse than the last. The first involved a private dinner at Charles's country estate, a long-standing gathering Tom had quietly attended for years without question. That morning his name disappeared from the list. Camilla was reportedly furious, complaining openly that William was overstepping. That's when you know this had stopped being a private irritation. She wasn't hiding it anymore because she knew exactly what it looked like. The second call hit Laura Lopes. For 3 years she'd been attached to a literacy charity dinner, showed up, supported the cause, put her name on it. A notice arrived saying her role was now under review pending the new household calendar. 3 years reduced to 1 sentence. The third call broke through Camilla's anger and turned it into panic. It was about her grandchildren. Every year, appearances at the family's coastal retreat had been coordinated through Camilla's office. She decided who attended, how it worked. That authority was pulled and handed to Catherine's staff. This wasn't a guest list anymore. This was family. This was access. The cruel part is she'd been warned. Months earlier, household insiders had quietly suggested that once William and Catherine fully stepped into power, her position would weaken. At the time it sounded like gossip. Now it looked like a prediction. Then people noticed something even more uncomfortable. Laura's charity had already started discussions about a replacement before Laura had even been formally told. People don't move that fast unless they already know which way the wind is blowing. Weeks later, the family portrait that had hung in a palace corridor for years, Tom and Laura in it, disappeared, officially taken down for restoration. Nobody believed that, least of all Camilla. She pushed to have it reinstated and got nowhere. When she asked who authorized it, she was told to stop asking and let it go. None of this was really about Tom or Laura. It was about William erasing the assumption that they had a permanent place in the royal structure. And the most painful part? This was only the beginning. The worst blow hadn't landed yet. While Tom and Laura were learning how fast privileges vanish, something much bigger was happening, and Camilla didn't even know the conversation was taking place. William and Catherine were discussing Andrew. By the time they finished, his remaining duties were gone. His position in royal life was gone. Any realistic future at major events was gone. All in a single meeting Camilla wasn't invited to. That's what made it hurt. This was never really about Andrew, it was about what his survival represented. For years, whenever he was sinking, Camilla had helped keep him afloat, managing relationships, smoothing tensions, preserving a position many believed should have disappeared already. William and Catherine erased all of it without telling her first. Worse, she found out secondhand through her own office after the information filtered down through staff. A decision affecting years of her work reached her through palace gossip. That's the level she'd been reduced to. When she confronted Charles, his answer didn't help. He claimed he hadn't wanted her carrying the burden, which sounds considerate until you remember this was a woman who'd carried burdens for him for years. It felt less like protection and more like an excuse. Camilla's real wound wasn't losing the argument, it was what being excluded said about her. She reportedly requested records from the meeting. There were none, just a cold explanation calling it a logistics matter, not a family one. The implication was brutal. This isn't your business anymore. By the end of the week, Andrew wasn't really the issue. Camilla was fighting a different battle, whether her influence still carried any weight at all, and she wasn't winning. What she didn't know was that the next public answer to that question was already on its way. It happened at a state banquet, and it involved a tiara. This might be the most ruthless move of the entire week, because it looked so harmless on the surface. Just jewelry, right? Wrong. Certain pieces are never just jewelry, they're signals. And that particular tiara was reserved for only the most senior royals. As queen consort, it should have gone to Camilla. Instead, Catherine walked in wearing it. The second she appeared, people noticed. Every diplomat, every courtier, everyone who understood royal protocol got the message immediately. Catherine wasn't dressing like the future anymore. She was acting like it had already arrived. That's where it turned painful for Camilla, because weeks earlier she'd reportedly asked about wearing that exact tiara for one of her own events. The answer was simple, unavailable, already allocated. Then she walked into a state banquet and saw exactly where it had gone. Imagine being told no, only to discover the truth was never really no. The people with more power just didn't want it on your head. Then the seating. Moving a chair by one position sounds trivial, except seating charts are one of the oldest ways institutions communicate hierarchy without a word. Camilla's seat had reportedly shifted further from the head table than expected. She acted like it meant nothing. Underneath, she was seething. Then the toast. Traditionally a direct acknowledgement of the queen consort by name, this time the wording changed. Instead of naming Camilla, it thanked the wider family. Broad enough to mean almost anyone, and somehow it meant everyone except the person it should have honored. After everything that had already happened that week, it became harder to call any of it coincidence. The symbols that once reinforced Camilla's position had stopped doing that, and everyone could see it. What followed was reportedly a miserable stretch between the two households. Communication grew strained, calls were routed through staff, appearances were quietly adjusted or cancelled. One aide reportedly called it the coldest atmosphere they'd felt in years. The real insult wasn't being excluded, it was realizing no one felt the need to pretend otherwise anymore. By the time the banquet ended, Camilla had reached her limit. The tiara, the seating, the missing toast. One humiliation is frustrating. 3 in one night starts feeling deliberate. Reports say she never even changed out of her banquet clothes. She just sat there alone. Her phone was nearby. Charles's name was still in her recent calls. She looked at it and didn't call, because what exactly was he supposed to say? The damage was already done, and everyone had already seen it. Instead, she called Tom Parker Bowles. The call reportedly lasted 4 minutes, and the most revealing part is what she didn't ask. She didn't ask how he was feeling. She wanted to know one thing. What are people saying? Tom didn't soften it. Things looked bad, really bad. People were talking. Staff were talking. The people who spend their lives tracking status and influence had already reached their conclusions, and those conclusions were brutal. Camilla had been pushed aside. Her influence was fading, and staying close to her wasn't nearly as important as it used to be. Imagine hearing that from your own son. Reports say she went silent. Tom asked if she was still there. Her answer, "I'm thinking." Then she ended the call. That may have been the saddest moment of the entire night, the moment she stopped arguing with what was happening and started wondering if it was actually true. Now here's the twist that changes everything you've just heard. What if William was never the real story? What if everyone was watching the wrong person? For weeks, every decision, every snub, every shift out of the palace had been attached to William's name. But according to people close to the situation, there was another figure sitting at the center of it all, Catherine. Once you look at the story through that lens, it all makes different sense. The moment Charles's health forced more responsibility onto William, Catherine's position changed too. Power doesn't move through a palace alone. The more he trusted her, the more access she gained to the decisions shaping the institution's future. And unlike William, Catherine had spent years watching from the sidelines, watching how Camilla ran the family, who got access, who got invited, who benefited from connections rather than official roles. Reports suggest she never liked any of it. Not the informal arrangements, not the blurred boundaries, not the open-door culture that let people drift in and out of royal life just because someone powerful wanted them there. From where she stood, it looked messy and uncontrolled. So when real authority finally arrived, she didn't waste time. She started changing things, quietly at first, then all at once. Remember the receiving line? According to reports, the idea may not have started with William at all. One advisor allegedly admitted the possibility had been discussed the night before, planted carefully enough to become someone else's decision. The most effective operators rarely force people to act. They guide them toward the outcome they already want. Now look back at everything else. The vanished invitations, the names quietly dropped from guest lists, the reassigned events. Reports suggest instructions about how to treat non-working family members had already been circulating long before any of these public incidents happened. The policy came first. The public consequences came later. That's why the incidents all connected. Separately they look small. Together they look like a plan. That must have been devastating for Camilla, because it meant this was part of a shift that had been unfolding for months, one she never saw coming. While everyone focused on William, Catherine was helping reshape the rules underneath him, and the most remarkable part, almost nobody noticed. She stood beside him, smiled for photographs, attended engagements, and let the world assume he was carrying the entire transition alone. Whether you admire that approach or not, it's hard to argue it wasn't effective. Because while everyone was watching the future king, the person helping redesign the future of the institution was standing right beside him the entire time, and almost nobody saw her coming.